present. Is that correct, Sean?
I did at least at one point see
All right.
clearly
John's
we have
back
Bob
and reads the
Lyons,
bio.
Robert Burke is here, Dan Cody's here, Don Knorr is with us by phone, Carrie Schuffner's in, Carl Stumpf is here, Susan West is in. So yes, all committee members are in.
All right, then we have a quorum and we can proceed to do our business agenda, the first item of which is the minutes of August 10th, 2020.
I would make a motion to approve the minutes of August 10th.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Susan, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion regarding the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the August 10th meeting minutes are adopted. Second item is the sign placement for Scooter's Coffee, revisited for at least the second time here. I understand, Sean, we have a guest or two on that item in the audience. I can't see them all.
Right, Adam Laborde, if I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, and feel free to unmute yourself at this point here, Adam, is with us as a co-owner representative of Scooter's Coffee, and Jim Bowman, the property owner, is also with us tonight.
Who was here at our last meeting, or not our last meeting, but the last time we dealt with this issue.
In June, right.
Yeah. All right, well, we're
And
kind
I'm
of,
the alder, and I'm the alder for the district, if I can make a comment too.
well, let me preface this first. We're kind of above and beyond the limits of proper parliamentary procedure here. I mean, things should be considered at either the meeting they were adopted or the next following meeting. We sort of waived that requirement when we allowed this to be reconsidered in June, but now we're back again, and parliamentary procedure that we're supposed to operate by also indicates that you should only reconsider items once. But nonetheless, I think it's reasonable to allow folks to make any additional comments if they have any, although, you know, the committee has looked at this twice, and I would hope to the extent people have something to say, it will be something new that we haven't seen and heard before. So with that, we have Emily wishes to say something, and I don't know about the other two folks if they wish to speak or not, but we'll provide a reasonable amount of time here for people to make whatever comments they want to make, but I hope we don't dwell on this too terribly long. I think everybody's familiar with the issue. All right, who would like to go first? Emily?
Thank you for that. First of all, I want to say, as the alder over the district, this is the third company, or the third business that has been at that site in the 4 years I've lived in the district. It's a part of university that we've lost a lot of businesses, including Sonic, the Chinese restaurant, a tattoo parlor, the Chicken Run, and I can tell you I am a perfect customer for the Scooter's Coffee. I leave Sauk Trail on Branch Street in the morning to pick up, or after I drop off my child in non-pandemic times. I start barreling towards Madison to drop off the second child, and if without signage, I forget about it every time. And I'm in the left lane, and by the time I see it, I want my coffee, can't get over. So without signage, this business is not going to be very successful. And I say that because as the third business in 4 years, there's something we need to do differently. Now, part of the reason I asked for this to be referred was that we recently talked about in council about how to help businesses during a pandemic. If they're having a hard time getting customers to come in before the pandemic, it's probably doubly hard right now. So I thank you for this time. I understand that there's other things that have been considered, but is there something that we can take another look at to help this business be successful and start building, start stabilizing this part of university? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Emily. Um, Who would like to go next?
Yeah, Bob, can you hear me? This is Adam Laborde.
Okay, hi, yes, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Yeah, thanks for the time. Emily's right. When we met with Common Council last week, one of the reasons why we were meeting with them is just exactly what she said about how can you help support local business during a pandemic. And I had mentioned, we're not looking for money, anything like that. We're literally just looking for signage. Signage is so big, especially since we're a new brand. We just opened in December. Never would have expected the pandemic to hit. And so we're already kind of dealing with those challenges. But on top of that signage, is a main component. It's going to be a main component to our success. I mean, we have excellent product and everything like that, but if people don't see what we have and understand where we're located, that's going to be, obviously detrimental to our business. And I understand that the sidewalk, the right-of-way issue, this is a unique property. I know we've got approval to have the sign in our behind the property line or within the property line, but moving it out another, I think it's about 11 feet what we have, and it's still 12 feet or so away from the sidewalk. Putting it out that much further is going to help us exponentially. I don't think you guys realize how important that would be, those extra feet, especially when we've talked before about not knowing what's going to happen at that Sonic development, and anything that they put in there. And I think you could see in some of the documents that have been shared in previous meetings, the sign starts to disappear when things get built up. So, and I mentioned, I know last meeting, thank you for letting Jim present. The thing that we're kind of concerned about, though, is that when you guys originally had the meeting March 9th to discuss this, we were not made aware. So, and when we had our meeting December 12th with planning to get everything approved, it was our understanding that you guys were going to discuss, it was really just a matter of utilities in the right of way and not encroaching or not potentially hitting those utilities. And that's why we spent about $2,000 already in this process to make sure we had a survey done. So we're not going to hit so that, we're at least 4 feet away from those underground utilities. So that, I think our biggest concern is that process. We didn't feel like we were kind of in the loop with it. And then when we finally got the request back, or the notes back from your committee, and it just being not approved at all, we were expecting, you guys to say, oh, you're still too close to utilities, move it back a little bit, but we're still good. So I guess that's what we're just kind of, pleading with you guys, is that it's not a visibility concern. I know that that's been brought up as well. Right now there's an inflatable at that location. And if you go to the location, you can see there's the visibility triangle. There's not an impacting people leaving, taking a right-hand turn outside of the property, making a left-hand or making a right-hand turn into the property. No issues with the sidewalk, anything like that. So, and even if there was, we could still move back a couple feet and even get better visibility. But like I mentioned, to help our business succeed, we really need that sign out there, and we need it as close to the road as possible. And to help, and like Emily mentioned, just the success of a business being in there, having, we're the third business that's been in there in the last, well, actually 3 years. So I guess that's what, you know, I'm basically just here to kind of plead our case and hope you guys can really help our business.
All right. Thank you. Adam, does
I see
Mr.
that
Baldwin
Susan has
wish-
her hand up.
Okay. I wondered if Mr. Baldwin wished to say anything also before we get to the committee member. Is he still here?
Yes. Jim, do you want to unmute yourself if you want to speak to the committee?
Oh, I think he's still muted.
Jim, in the lower left of your screen should be a microphone symbol with a slash through it. If you click on that, it would unmute you if you'd like to talk to the committee.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
So the only question I wanted to ask, and it relates to, Sean, it relates to your note, where the last two lines you talk about, you're not aware of a private sign currently permitted in the public street right of way in Middleton, and it sort of addresses a precedent issue. So the question I want to ask here is the whole issue that we've been dealing with from the very beginning this precedent?
I think there are a couple of things that I know the committee has previously considered, and I think the Plan Commission considered some of this as well. And the first of which is that a sign placed at the northwest corner of the property on site appears to be visible from the street, both in current and in future planned development conditions. So I know that the committee considered visibility being acceptable for a sign placed on site.
Can I respond to that?
Well, let me just mention another issue that the committees have considered is that a sign on the driveway may obstruct vision of drivers attempting to leave the site and enter University Avenue. And while other property owners have placed signs in such a configuration with respect to the sidewalk clearance, they did so on private property at their own risk. Doing so on public property assumes some public risk to it. And a third issue is about this right-of-way precedence issue. I believe that there are many business owners who would prefer their signage as close to the street as is possible, including if it's in the street right-of-way. So I think allowing it sets a policy preference for the city then to say this is how we want to deal with signage. Whether that's throughout the city or just along University Avenue, I think it does set a precedence. So those are the main issues that I think the committee has considered in the past. I would like to circle back to one comment that Adam made earlier about not having been aware of the March meeting, but I double checked my email messages and I had notified Andy Nelson and Mike Michaelis, as I think they were the ones most involved with the sign application at the time. So they were invited, but did not attend that meeting. And I don't know why they didn't pass that message along to others.
So
Right, because yeah, we did not, yeah. Right, okay.
All right. Are there committee members who wish to weigh in again here?
Can I respond to Sean for a minute there? This is Jim.
Sure.
So with regard to the statement that development on the neighboring site would not obstruct our sign, currently there's a real estate sign 8 feet off the sidewalk, 8 feet from the sidewalk, about halfway up the Sonic property, that would obstruct the sign if it's not on the right of way. And any kind of trees, shrubs, or monument sign put on by whoever develops that property will obstruct our sign if it's not on the right of way.
I guess, and that's a fair point. Your neighbor to the west could place things that would be in line from some approach angle to your sign. And they could do that regardless of where you put your sign.
Right, but they won't be able to block our sign if it's closer to the street.
They could, actually.
Well, not as likely, because there's about 35 feet from our sign that they don't own the property yet. They can't, that's part of that right of way. That's pretty wide right of way there.
Well, I think it angles in there, but their temporary sign, I guess I was not considering just because it's temporary in nature. I was more looking at their building and their site plan that they had turned in.
Right, but any trees and shrubs or anything that goes in that space will be a potential obstruction. The other issue, as far as the precedent is concerned, is that's a pretty unique situation where we have such a far setback relative to our neighboring property. And it seems to me that in looking at our situation, there's not going to be or if any other sites that are going to have that particular situation where somebody's that far back compared to their neighbor, which makes our situation, I think, rather unique, and I think worth considering setting a precedent because of our situation. You're going to be hard pressed to find many other property owners that are going to have that particular situation.
Right, so all the properties to the east of here also have really wide right of way compared to the street and the sidewalk. But there's a bit of an angle. There's a bit of an angle to the right of way here, straddling a property line. That's different than I would find at most other property lines. I think the question becomes, to what degree is that so unique that if the city said yes here, they would have legs to stand on to say no every place else? And I don't know the answer to that. It really is a policy question.
All right, committee members wish to weigh in on this once again?
Yeah, Bob, I have a question for the scooters owners. I drove by today this morning to visually look at the whole area. And there's a big balloon coffee cup sitting there. Is that within the city's right of way? Or is that on private property?
That is actually the location of where the monument sign would go.
On private property or?
That's on city property.
Okay.
And so, and part of that is we put that in there as a temporary sign. And before the neighboring property had their trees cut down, that was completely obstructed, having it on our property. When you were coming from the west,
Yes.
you couldn't see the inflatable until you were pretty much right on the property.
Before
so we
the
moved
trees
it out
were cut down.
Well, and even with its current location in the public right of way, it was still obstructed until the trees were removed.
Okay.
And so that's part of the issue we're running into, is that if they, like Sean had just mentioned, the right of way, or their property, the neighboring property, their property line jets up again. It's about 30 feet away from our property line towards the sidewalk again. So in that location, if they put trees or anything out, any signage out, again, it would directly block our sign or impair the visibility of our sign. And that's why we're trying to think long-term with this, is that, the closer we can get to the street, and if we can get as close as the private properties are, have had their monument signs away from the sidewalk, that's all we're kind of looking for, is to give us our sign the best chance it can, to see, because, you know, like Jim said, we are a very unique property, just the way that, you know, we're 20 some feet off the sidewalk on that side, and, you know, just the way that the sidewalk jets back on the other side of the property. But yeah, so, but to answer your question, right now it is in the public right of way, and it has good visibility.
I have another question. I'm trying to, not being able to be there and actually see it. On one of the diagrams of sign placement, it's showing the existing sign formerly for Crandall's. Which
Correct.
side of the building is that on? Is that on the east side or the west side?
It's on the west side.
Okay. And that spot is not acceptable.
Right, that's behind the property line.
Okay.
And we're hoping to get another about 6 to 7 feet beyond that, closer to the road.
This
Okay.
is Jim. Can I add one comment to what Adam said? The tree that Adam was referring to was 20 feet off the sidewalk on the Sonic property. It would have been in front of a building, or would have been, it's not as far back as the building would have to be, but that particular tree was about 15 feet tall, and it completely obstructed the sign when he had it on the property, rather than where it is now.
Okay. I'm just trying to remember. I never had trouble finding Crandall's when it was in business. So.
Could I share two thoughts?
Yeah.
But the problem with Crandall's, though, is that was a known entity, right? Because that was around for almost 30 years. So you knew about it. We're a new brand to the area in a pretty competitive market. Obviously in Omaha and Lincoln, Scooters is very well known, and wouldn't have these problems. But, you know, we're in a new market, and so that's why, like I was saying, visibility and signage for us is key to our success, and so that we don't run into, so we're not the next Chicken Run that's only there for a year.
All right, any other committee members have comments or questions?
I do, Bob.
Dan?
Two items. One is it seems like a jog in the right of way is part of the issue here. Am I incorrect there?
I think
No, that's
that's
correct.
part of it. This is the transition between, I'll consider, you know, businesses to the west that have a
Yeah.
somewhat narrower right of way, and the businesses to the east that have a wider right of way.
Is there? I don't like the liability piece of a you know, something like this on the public property. I'm struggling with that. But, you know, is there any opportunity to adjust the right of way to look at it from that point so that we don't have the liability issue? That's one question I have. And then the other question I have is, without the tree there, the visibility is fine. And if we're here to protect all businesses, then we maybe should consider protecting the access to an established sign, saying that, you know, we can't impede the visibility of an established sign in the future. Protect that in some way, and that way we protect all businesses against, you know, one of the things they're concerned with here is some tree planting or another sign coming in the future that's going to block their sign. So
I think with respect to the first question, could we vacate some right of way? Maybe. It was county right of way that was jurisdictionally transferred to the city recently.
mm-hmm.
I don't know if that carries with it the ability to vacate part of it. Maybe it does, and we could look into it. It just hadn't been the question at issue, so I didn't look into that yet.
I'm just looking at the next cause, or the next why is it a problem, you know? Okay.
Yeah. And with the second question, I think it would get into plan commission and planning staff, really, review of landscaping proposals. It might be possible once we're into a curve, it would be harder, and from what distance away would matter because the angle changes. But it would effectively tell adjacent property owners what they can and cannot do on their site with their landscaping plans. So the city, I think, would want to consider that pretty carefully as to how to best do that.
Okay.
In lieu of transferring the right-of-way, can there be an indemnification agreement?
That's a good lawyer question. I don't know to what degree we're shielded by that. Maybe, it's interesting. I don't know.
I have one question that maybe since we have 3 council members here, they could shed some light on it. I don't understand why if the council members or the council does not agree with the decision that the Public Works Committee came to not once but twice, why it just doesn't override that decision and grant the signage. Our decisions have been overridden in the past, and I'm not sure why this one keeps kicking back here.
This is Robert. I can speak to that. I mean, partly it's it wasn't on the agenda for the council. It was something that was brought up in public comments. So it wasn't something that we could act upon there anyway. And the standard for us is to refer back to the experts, which is the committee that has been tasked with knowing the details of any particular case. So sending it back to Public Works was appropriate and was the right way to handle this. Now, I will say, we are looking for ways as a city to help our businesses without throwing money at them, which we don't have money to throw, right? I mean, everybody would love if we could give everyone $1 million grant, but that's not really in the cards. And here we have a case where a business owner has said, look, I'm not even asking for money. I'm just asking for help, and this is what I'm looking for. Is there something you can do for us? And I think that fell on somewhat receptive ears to the Common Council.
Did the council look at the potential liability issue when it made that decision? You're not giving money, but you're accepting some liability.
Again, this was not discussed except in a public comments section. There was no way that those details could be reviewed by the Common Council in the meeting that we just had a week ago.
Yeah.
But
we did not have any of the documents associated with this project.
When we acted on this the last time in June, didn't the council adopt the committee's recommendation?
No, it didn't go to council.
It didn't?
I don't recall it coming before council, but so I'm unless Sean has a note saying otherwise, I'm not sure that this has been approved yet one way or another by the Common Council.
No,
And I don't think council approves sign
Details.
right.
details.
So the brief history is that in December of last year, the Plan Commission conditionally approved the sign if Public Works Committee supported that, which is why we drafted the license agreement.
Okay.
Because that's the form that the committee's approval would take, is the terms under which it would be allowed in public right-of-way and would have to be removed at some point, potentially. The committee in March did not concur with that Plan Commission motion. And so because the Plan Commission's approval was conditional upon Public Works approval, the whole thing fell apart. The Plan Commission approval evaporated effectively. There was no reason to take it to the council because the condition wasn't met. In June, the Public Works Committee didn't take action.
Correct.
This is Carrie. I The reasons why we didn't move forward with it in June still hold for me. I think that, you know, just the like you mentioned, the liability of this, it's in the right of way, and you know, that would just set a precedent that I'm not sure we want to follow. So those are my comments.
Well, if I could, my comment would be, I tend to agree with Carrie that the responsibility of the committee is to look at the public policy aspect of the sign placement. And I think it's a bad precedent to start saying we can place signs in city right of way. If the council wishes to look at that and say our concern for helping local businesses here overrides that concern in this case, or for the time being, or for whatever reason, then the council can agree to override our recommendation and do as it wishes. But I think from a public policy perspective, we should stay with the decision that we made earlier. That is my opinion. But others probably have different ones.
This is Robert. I guess I could put up my hand, but can I ask a question?
Sure.
Great. I haven't figured out how to put up my hand. Oh, here, I found it. There, I raised my hand so it's official. My question is, the current inflatable sign, I guess, is there any reason, I mean, so it's in the public right away right now. Is that a problem? And if it were to stay longer, I don't know if that helps this business owner at all, but if it were to stay longer and stay in that location, is that a concern? Or is the permanence of the permanence of this sign that we're discussing now part of the major issue?
Well, I would think that's part of the major issue. I don't know if the sign that's in the right of way now is there with the city's blessing or not. I don't know that anybody ever approved that being put there, did they?
Not to my knowledge.
No.
I don't recall if that ever came to this committee for approval. So I don't know what the liability issues are either with the temporary sign, but it's nothing I'm quite certain that this committee ever recommended be allowed to be in the right of way.
Definitely. No, I didn't know what was in the right of way. I hadn't seen any application and certainly didn't give any permission for it to be in the right of way.
Well, Sean, I have a couple of questions for you and the committee. Number one is that, not blocking the sign, I guess that is something which as a city, we could look into now as well as the future. And I think that is which we should consider. And the second is for you that looking at that temporary sign and where we are asking them to have the permanent sign, I have visited this place, looked at the sign. How far south that proposed sign would be, and how long the temporary sign can stay there? And then I got a couple of other points.
I don't have the answers, Your Honor, to either of those questions. I don't know how far south it would have to go, and I don't know under what conditions the sign was put up, and I don't know if there were any limits as to its duration.
Maybe Sean might know. Sean, do you know?
I think the old Crandall's sign, that's, at least it was still in place, it may still be in place, was near the property corner.
Okay, so that's where we are proposing it to be?
Well, I think that's where alternative location 1 on the sign application is, at the northwest corner of the property there. Regarding temporary sign, that usually gets dealt with by planning staff, not engineering staff. So I don't know what sketch they had in terms of their review for a temporary sign permit. But that would be a better question for someone familiar with it than for me.
Okay, so the last one is, which was also brought up by Daniel as well as one of the other committee members. So, and we had some conversation earlier, if you could look into the liability issues and if we could actually, transfer that property, consider transferring the property if the county would allow, and you're probably going to look into it at some stage. And maybe we could address this issue at that time, either at the Public Works Committee or at the City Council level, I suppose. So,
I can reach out to the county highway staff if the committee would like. They would probably know.
okay, so that would be, I think, the right way to go if you want to determine the liability and also suggestion was well, whatever. I mean, we don't want the public to have the liability for that sign. And if we could address that issue and there's no other safety issues, then it would be easier for the city council to address. Okay, that's all I had. So thank you.
All right.
This is Robert. I would ask that we at least look into, is it how possible and easy would it be to modify the edge of the city versus private lot line, basically, or easement, to see if there's a way that we can give them a few more feet without this becoming a public liability.
All right. I don't think we have to reconsider our prior position or our prior motion to do that. Robert, do you want to make that just as a request of Sean? Are you asking him to look into that, or you wish the city attorney to look into that? Or
well, it's a good point. Whether Sean, is that something that we can follow up on?
I can reach out to county staff, and I think they would know whether it's permitted at the county level. Beyond that, our typical process is entirely within the city. So at that point, we normally then just require the benefiting property owner to prepare a legal description and exhibit drawings sufficient for the city attorney to start drafting the right documents to get those wheels in motion.
Okay, I guess let's ask the question so we know whether forward motion can be made on that front.
So Robert, are you making a motion on that?
I started to, but I think the consensus that I've heard right now is that that's really just an ask of Sean rather than a motion.
Okay.
I'm
I
willing to
certainly
make.
support the idea. I think this is a really good first step. And if it could work, we'll eliminate all the problems.
I heard you mention that you have to check with the county. Is that the county's right of way, state's right of way? I mean, it is a state highway, federal highway, actually.
Well, it's an interesting thing. It's a national highway system route, but not a federal highway. It had been a county highway. It was MS, but they jurisdictionally transferred maintenance responsibility to the city. So whether they retained some interest in the land itself, I don't know. But that's I think the question.
Also, knowing how difficult it is to get right away, I'm a little bit concerned about giving it back.
Well, it's fair. Once it's gone, it's gone. This one is a taper transition instead of just an abrupt jog in width.
Understand.
And if we convert one to the other, that might notch out a little bit of land on which, say, a sign could sit.
Okay.
well, I don't think there's any harm in asking. If we don't get any response, or if we get a negative response, at least we know what that avenue is going to yield.
Yeah, because I think in my mind, make sure I'm not muted. Okay, good. There's a purpose for the right of way, right? So I just want to make sure that we keep that in mind. Is there's a reason why it exists, but I guess it's fine to ask the question. I don't know. I'm still kind of holding firm to our previous decision, and we've spent a lot of time reviewing this already.
All right, then we have a consensus that we will ask Sean to inquire of the county as to the right-of-way status and whether it's possible to perhaps move the right-of-way a little bit that might accommodate the placement of this sign on private property rather than in city right-of-way. Is that where we are?
That is what I was asking for, yes.
Okay. Is everybody comfortable with that?
I support it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, then let's proceed that way without any kind of a formal motion, although Sean, you might want to make some indication of this in minutes.
Yeah, I'll try to include a bit of the
Consensus of the committee
discussion
to proceed that way.
and the consensus. Yes, okay.
Okay. All right. Thank everyone who came to provide input on this issue. And with that, I think we will move on to our next request for an exception.
Is Dr. Colison with us this evening? And make sure to check your mute in the lower left-hand corner if you are. There are a couple of phone-in numbers, and I don't know if you're one of them by chance. I had sent an email inviting him to discuss this with the committee. I'm not seeing any clear indication that he's among our attendees tonight.
All right. Well, Sean, do you want to just
So-
review this one briefly then?
Sure, I'll pick up on that for him. The last time the committee considered something similar to this was in May of 2018. I did verify with our operations manager that our snowplow directly hit this mailbox and that it had been properly installed. So it is fair for the city to reimburse for damage. We do by policy have an $80 limit on repairs and replacements. But I know in the past, the committee has granted an exception in this specific neighborhood because their homeowners association requires extraordinarily expensive mailboxes, far in excess of what the standard is dictated by the United States Postal Service. So we don't have anything in policy that says at the staff level we can approve this sort of thing, but at the committee level we have and can. And I think that's always the policy question, is it appropriate for the city taxpayers to supplement these expensive mailboxes without having any directive that they should be that way.
Isn't this something that they should take up with the homeowners association?
That's what I was just going to say. Yes. Yes. It should not. Yeah.
Well, and I think that was my point 2 years ago and continues to be my point, is if the homeowners association as a community thinks that this is appropriate, maybe they should fund the incremental difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And
Because the reimbursement rate has probably been about this amount for many years. I would think even while this was under construction.
You know, I don't know the last time we changed this. It's been about this for a very long time. Madison's is still $75, and even that's sufficient for a standard post and a standard mailbox that get the job done. These are hundreds of dollars, and
Sean, could I make a comment? In Middleton Hills, we have alleys that the homeowners or the neighborhood association maintains. And basically the last 8 feet that backs up against the alley, belongs to the neighborhood association. It's standard policy that if we plant flowers, shrubs, or put anything there, they can be removed and not the cost not replaced, or if they're damaged, it's the homeowner's responsibility. So I see that as a reasonable policy. We're paying for a mailbox that gets damaged at basically the standard cost that most citizens would have. But if you go above and beyond, I'm having a little bit of trouble for citizens to be paying for these expensive mailboxes. And I see it's similar to the Middleton Hills Alley situation.
Sean, did you say we had an exception in North Lake once before?
We did.
I
That case in May of 2018, the committee directed paying for the full cost.
What was the cost?
Oh, it was, I want to say in the ballpark of $300, give or take.
You know, the interesting thing is I drove that today and it's not consistent. The mailboxes, some of them look like shiny copper, but the copper doesn't stay shiny that long, so I'm not sure what they are. And they look expensive, but that's about half of them. The other half look like standard black mailboxes.
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't see anything that you've given us that really gives you a specification on what's required. I mean, to me, what comes out of their website is a suggestion. I mean, you can get the mailbox from UPS. You can hire this guy to build the post and install the mailbox. That's not a specification. So I'd really like to know what the specified requirements are. If he wants $500 and some, that seems really excessive.
And
because frankly, if I lived in that neighborhood, I'd rebuild it myself.
Do we need to make a motion on this in terms of if we are saying no, we will not, make an exception to our reimbursement policy? Is that?
I think a motion should be made, and that's the one that I would make. But Carrie, you're kind of beating me to it.
Yeah.
You want to make a motion?
Yes,
I'll second it.
Sure. Yes, I'll make a motion that we do not make an exception to our reimbursement policy of replacing mailboxes.
And I would second that. And just add on for information for the owner is to please talk with the homeowners associations, see if it is their rules, they can discuss maybe if they want to chip in some portion, but we'll chip in our standard portion.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
It's a great amendment.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of just a informational thing for the homeowner, but for our purposes, I think for the city's purposes, your motion is correct, and I second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion?
I'd like to make a comment that, it seems odd to me that if our snow plows damage it, and it's the only one apparently there's one every 2 or 3 years it gets damaged. It just seems odd that we would not be liable for that mailbox because we damaged it if it was installed properly.
Don, that's a good point, and I'm sorry to cut off whoever was just about to speak, but imagine this. I put in a tree, it's fully on my property, but it grows out, it grows over, and I put in, it's a tree that I had to put in, hundreds of thousands of dollars because it's some bizarre, crazy, weird tree that only grows in, South America, and I put it in, and yes, I put it in correctly, and yes, it's on my property, but if somebody in the city does some damage to tree roots, let's say, by replacing a sidewalk, the fact of the matter is the city's not liable for replacing a $100,000 tree. It's like, well, sorry, we will give you something for the damage maybe, but we can't, the city cannot just take on the liability of somebody puts in a gold plated mailbox and we have to pay for that. At the end of the day, I think we need to have a standard limit, and that's fair.
This is a standing policy for a very common fixture that's in front of every house. I think it's a rule that we live by.
Yeah. That's
Well,
my thought.
I don't know that I have seen any in Middleton, but there are certainly subdivisions in places that have extremely elaborate mailboxes that have masonry structures all around them and whatever. If someone puts in something like that at their own expense and it gets damaged, I don't really think it's fair for the rest of the taxpayers in the city of Middleton to have to spend what conceivably could be a very expensive bill to redo masonry work around a mailbox post.
Yeah. I mean, I understand
Yeah.
Don's point, but I'm firmly on the side of we'll pay up to a capped limit.
And so, taking your approach, Robert, why do we pay anything?
Because it's fair, but people are required for the most part to have mailboxes. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think most people have mailboxes, and we did do some damage to it. So I'm not opposed to it there being. I think it's okay to have a number like $80 versus only being the difference between 0 or full replacement cost. So I think we stick with the rules that we have in place.
I think too, that was the genesis of the policy, was from a homeowner perspective, they're required to put that out there. It's not optional. They have to do that. And it has minimum specifications. So as the public goes, we were assuming the cost of that risk for things that we damaged. It had to be there and we broke it. But there has to be an upper limit to that.
Yeah.
This is in public right of way. Sorry to bring that back up.
Yep,
Yes.
it is.
So,
And the Postal Service says it has to be there.
yeah. So there is the fact that the homeowners association is directing their tenants to put something of higher than reimbursable value in the public right of way where it's at risk. I think the homeowners association has some liability here.
I would just say they can deal with that themselves. I don't think the city can really opine about their liability, but I can certainly opine about the city's liability, and I think $80 is a fair price.
Right, I agree, because it would, we're not saying we wouldn't replace it. We're saying we will replace it, and you could pick out a mailbox that's up to $80. So I think that the policy is a good policy. We should just stick with it.
All right, is there any further discussion on the motion?
The only problem I have is that the gentleman who has this problem will go back to April of 2018 and say, but you paid for theirs.
Yeah, that's the difficulty with cities and you know, new elected officials every year and new committee members, volunteer committee members every year. But at the end of the day, no city can just basically be held to what did the person say when the city was founded in 1956 or whatever the year was. I don't have that date. 69, 68? Anyway, whenever we became a city, we at some point, yeah, there's a little variation and change from year to year. I think we're trying to hold the line here on a reasonable interpretation of what is required of the city. So I hear your concerns, Don, and they're not unfounded, but it doesn't change my vote tonight.
All right, is there further discussion on Robert's motion?
Technically, maybe Carrie's motion, and I seconded.
I'm sorry, Carrie's motion? Well, Carrie's motion and your amendment to it.
Sure.
All right. Any further discussion on the motion, whomever made it? All right, hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay.
Nay,
The ayes have it, and Don, you wish to be recorded as a nay?
correct.
Is that you? Okay,
All right, thanks.
very good, thank you. Next on the list is
Right, so we've
utility
got the-
budget.
Yep, the utilities operating budget. I hope that Dave Sarbacher is on the line. I think you're the 093.
Yes, sir. I am.
Great. So Dave prepared the operating budget for the water and the sewer utilities. In terms of decision items, there are only 2 being proposed. So this is a nice summary sheet for the whole thing, where MMSD fees are projected to go up, and insurance. Now, what is that insurance on? This looks like a water account. Huh?
Yeah, that's for water utility structures.
Oh, is that our property in the open?
Well, it's all of our well houses, our facilities, everything.
Hydrants, all that? Okay.
Yeah,
Anything that can get wrecked?
general insurance policy, yeah.
Okay. And that's a portion of the city's overall insurance, I think.
Yeah, it's just what the water utilities went up from, or is projected to go up from 2020 to 2021.
Perfect.
So that's
That
just
came
the,
from- I'm sorry, that came from Bill.
excuse my interruption, sorry. They say increases. Do we by chance know what percent those are?
Sewer, it's just, we typically just put in a 10% is what history has shown on MMSD treatment charges. We won't have those numbers till the end of October. And the insurance is what I guess Bill has been looking at for the different departments and for the city overall for budget numbers for next year.
Is that, Dave, do you know, is there a separate policy for the utilities, or is that just the portion of the overall insurance bill that's allocated to the utility?
I believe it's, the city's policy with the utility being part of that.
Okay.
This is Robert. It seems to me that if these are the only 2 decision items, this should be fairly easy because Madison Municipal Sewerage District is going to charge what they're going to charge, right? There's not really a lot of back and forth discussion on that.
Right.
Is that a correct statement, Dave?
Yes.
And then the same thing with insurance. While sure, we could potentially shop for other insurance agencies, I think the city kind of sticks with the horse it knows. That's not a phrase, but whatever. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of things to discuss on that one as well.
Yeah, unless Bill has been shopping for other companies to provide insurance for the city, I don't know. But this would have been what the utilities portion of it would have been with the company, I believe, that we're with right now.
Well, then, given that, there's really nothing here that we can say much about. I would make a motion to, what's my motion? To approve these 2 decision items and recommend them to the Common Council and Finance?
I'll second that, Susan.
I think that's the appropriate motion, is it not, Sean?
Yeah, normally we just approve them and recommend for submittal. In this case, we already had to submit them last Friday, but we're close enough. And like Dave said, we'll adjust as we go. As we find out better information, we'll adjust them, but they needed to go in.
Well, Sean, tweak my motion if there's another word that says what I meant to say, feel free to tweak it. But basically, yeah, let's approve this and forward it all on to Finance and Common Council as for budgeting purposes.
Okay.
All right.
Now, the hard numbers on the increases percentage-wise and everything else will come the end of October, first part of November, and those will be brought to the Public Works Committee at that time
Okay. All right.
for
we have
either review or acceptance or however what we want to do with that at that point.
Right. Right. Yep.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion?
Oh, I support the motion. I just need to ask a question just so I understand. The 206,000, that's an increase in sewage fees. Is some portion of that because we have a bigger base, so there'll be added revenue to support that? Or is this just an inflationary adjustment? Is it the 10% just seems big if it's just a year-over-year cost increase. There must be some increase in the base then.
I think it is mostly an MMSD, well, partly their treatment costs, including phosphorus, but partly their physical plant additions, their capital program has been raising our costs. So I don't think this is a huge volume difference, unless you know otherwise, Dave, in terms of extra.
No, it's not what they're treating. It's for, like Sean said, for infrastructure and for capital and improvements and throughout their whole system. And those costs get split between all of the member communities that are in the MMSD's service area. And that's just our portion of those costs.
So this is a capital increase then. Okay.
Well, capital and operational both.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
All right, is there further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that will be our recommendation of the Finance Committee and the Council. All right, next item. Sean.
Next item comes into waiving of late fees for the utility billing, specifically third quarter. So PSC had a cutoff in mid-July that said, you can't charge late fees until this specific date. Well, that specific date is in the midst of our third quarter. So while we could reinstate late fees beginning July 15th, we'd have to reprogram our billing to do it, which is estimated to cost $3,000 to $5,000, or just waive late fees, which we think will cost about $4,000. So it's a bit of a wash money-wise. We'll lose some money, but not a lot either way. So the staff recommendation is to waive late fees through the third quarter billing, so we don't have to reprogram the software and answer 1,000 phone calls. There's a different policy question sort of embedded in that is, does the committee and or council want to waive them through the end of the year? That'd be another, say, $4,000. But to address the next looming billing cycle, we wanted to at least pin down that third quarter. You have anything to add, Dave?
No, I don't think so. Other than if all these fees can be rolled into our next rate case, depending, if it goes to the September billing or the December billing, those can be included in a rate case to be recouped by everybody in the system, basically.
Okay.
So, that will be included in our next rate case, whether it's 3 quarters or 4 quarters worth of waiving late fees. And most of these late fees are the same folks that pay them on their taxes at the end of the year anyways. We haven't had a big influx of residents that have not paid their bills on time. A few, but they typically call and say, can I pay so much this week and some more, in a couple of weeks, and we've been able to work them out without a lot of paperwork or, a lot of additional work. So it's pretty standard for what, we've seen most years as far as late fees.
All right.
And this is Carrie. Sean, have we done this in the past where we've waived the late fees and then recouped them in the rate case later?
No.
I don't know. We waived them in the first and second quarter because PSC said so. Dave, you're saying no, we did not recoup that loss? Okay.
We believe we'll be able to include it on our next rate case, but no, this has never been done as far as I'm aware of. It was just specific to the COVID-19 problems. And this is all part of the same thing with utility shutoffs and those kinds of things that have been changed as we've worked our way through the COVID issue. So no, the PSC is the one that says if we can or we can't waive those. And typically they don't allow this type of waiving of fees, but in the pandemic, they made a special order to help out municipal, customers with payments if they lost their jobs, laid off, whatnot. So
it looks to me like we're in for roughly $4,000 either way. If we have to reprogram, we're in for 4,000, or if we allow the fees to be postponed or forgiven, then that's $4,000. We probably stand a better chance of recouping the forgiveness of the late fees than we do of the reprogramming, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it would seem to make sense to give the one with the hope that we may in fact recoup some of that, rather than spending the money that we would certainly not get back. So I would like to go that route.
And I agree. And I'm wondering too, I see the note in there that some utilities have just waived them through the end of the year. I'm wondering if we should just go ahead and consider that.
I would like to make a motion to recommend to council to waive the late fees through the end of the year. This is a way we can help businesses and individuals both dealing with all the issues associated with COVID.
This is Carrie. I would second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion?
This is Robert. The only thing I would say is if we make this recommendation, that's great. If council or finance balks at that, it at least needs to be made clear to them that, well, through third quarter, if nothing else, is a wash. Because you don't want them to reverse it, because we can make a recommendation, but in the case of quarter three, I think it's a no-brainer that we don't charge our citizens for money that we would spend. We either lose the money by not charging our citizens who are hurting due to COVID-19, or we spend the money that we get from charging them to allow us to charge them, which just seems ridiculous. So I think
Robert,
third quarter.
You and I have to explain this to council.
Exactly. I just
would say.
Hopefully
Sean will put it in the notes.
Can we consider the thing that we understand as being a wash as our first option, and then
that's what I'm wondering.
Through the end of the year, let the council take it to the next step if they want. You could offer that.
Can we make two motions? One to do it for sure for the third quarter, given the economics of that, and a supplemental motion to say, as long as we're doing it, let's waive it through the end of the year.
I can go along with the two motions.
I would go along with that too.
Question though, if we do it in the fourth quarter, do we then pay the $4,000 to reprogram the system?
No.
Good question.
No, it's just a full billing quarter. A full billing cycle is the main driver of that additional cost for them to come in and prorate a month and a half worth with fees included and a month and a half without late fees included. It gets into the software end of it and reprogramming it for those few weeks.
Okay, understood.
Should the motion then be to recommend approval of waiving late fee charges for at least the third quarter and preferably also the fourth quarter billing cycles?
So long as it does not produce any programming expense to the city.
Okay.
Is that your motion, Susan?
Yeah, I can go along with that.
Carrie, did you second
Yes,
that?
I'll second that.
Okay. Then we have in effect kind of a split motion here. Is there further discussion on it? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that will be our recommendation to the council, which will be carried forward by Robert and Susan.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any other business?
Well, that's the end of our agenda.
Move to close the meeting.
That's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Oh, second.
All right, motion has been made and seconded to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by saying nay. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Thank you all. We'll
Thank
see you in a few weeks to talk about Scooter's Coffee Shop.
Possibly.
Hopefully we'll have good news for him.
Yeah,
Possibly.
nice.